So, you are currently assistant professor at the Institute for Material Research at UNAM, which is where you actually studied originally, where you got your bachelor and PhD. Um, but during your PhD, you also spent a semester at the MIT, actually at Santa Barbara first, and then 1 year as an intern at the MIT with Christopher Cummins. And then after your PhD, you did a postdoc at Stanford in the group of Hima Karnadasa, and then you decided to go back to Mexico in 2015 to take your current position. And you haven't moved. You haven't moved since, right? So you are brave enough to try and do research in science from Mexico, which is amazing.
It's been quite an adventure.
I bet, and we're gonna discuss about your adventure. And that's the way we typically start our interviews, which is kind of reconstruct the path to your current position, right? But I like to start in a slightly unusual way and experiment with you a little bit. So, besides being a successful chemist, who would you say Diego Solis is today?
Wow, great question. I would say I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son. Um, I love a lot of things, and I'm a creature of love because I was raised that way. I love just adventure, nature, animals. I love thinking about different things, just from pretty much from just very philosophical and ethical things, all the way to tiny bits of phonons and electrons moving around. So I would describe myself like that. Just a curious person, just that enjoys to think about a lot of stuff. And most recently, I have been given the honorary title of best chef in the world by my 6-year-old daughter. So I'm wearing that very proudly.
What is your top dish that got you the award?
Oh, the latest one was carrot cake. So
Oh, wow.
so that worked great.
It's amazing. It's already very interesting, Diego, because obviously you put a lot of interesting concepts that I'm sure played a role in the various decisions that made your career and as your adventure, as you defined it just a few minutes ago. And so there's family there, right? There's love of nature and curiosity. There's a number of interesting points that I'm sure are going to come up. So now we can go back to reconstructing a little bit your path. And I am interested, right? So you mentioned the family and the relationships as being key to the person you are today, and I'm sure they have been key to the person you've been over your growth. So, what brought you to science in the first place? Because I think that is quite key for what you are at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it was a bit unusual because when I was little, I had a lot of issues. I had a language issue, so it was hard for me to speak properly, to express myself. I was also heavily dyslexic and a bit hyperactive, so I couldn't really read or write until I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, which at least for our standards was very late. All of my classmates were reading already. And the only thing that allowed me to stay with my classmate and in my group was that I was excelling at math and science and all that stuff. So I had like a good, or maybe slightly better than good, I guess, abstract thinking, even though I couldn't write or speak, which for many was like really troublesome. That allowed me to stay there, and that really motivated me. That really, I guess, promote my love for science, for math, and for all these kind of things. And I guess from that point on, and I really knew that I had to be some sort of scientist. I didn't know which. Like I knew that I had to be maybe a mathematician or physicist or biologist or something like. But I knew that was along the way. Also because I was really terrible with any other sort of things.
Well, that makes sense. Like working on your strengths and using that, for your choices. Did you get any special support or even link to science from your family? So, is there anyone in your family in a scientific career of any sort?
you know what? Not that I'm aware of. Like my both of my parents are economists. Uh, my most of my grandparents didn't even finish like a professional career, which was pretty standard for that time. And as as far as I know, I don't have any close relative that is doing anything related to science, which is kind of unusual. But I kind of knew like very early on.
It is not very unusual, to be honest. There are some people who actually follow a sort of family path, but there are many who actually just reinvent the path, and you're one of those, and it's actually more frequent than you might imagine. And so, from thinking about being a mathematician or a scientist of some sort, how did you end up doing chemistry?
It was a tough decision, honestly. As I said, I love all of the sciences, and I even considered going into philosophy, and I was really interested in ethics in high school, for example. Um, in the end, it was pretty much a coin toss. I mean, I knew that any one of those would be really amazing, but I ended up choosing chemistry just because I feel like it's probably the science subject that allows you to create more. It has this artistic touch to it that it allows you to create something that someone has never seen, a new chemical bond, a new molecule, a new material, and that combination of the scientific rigor and the understanding of the things combined with the ability to create new things really appealed to me, and that was the thing that ultimately led me to being a chemist.
Is there any particular figure, a mentor, someone who played a key role in your choices during this time?
You know, I was lucky enough that I had a lot of mentors, a lot of valuable people that gave me a lot of knowledge and that influenced me here and there. It's hard to mention just one because I took bits and pieces from everywhere that I could. Um, I don't know. If I had to mention one, I would have to say my father. He really inspired me, not exactly in regards to science, but he always pushed me to just do whatever I want to do, but do it as best as I could, and that really pushed me to keep grinding and to keep going along this path.
Yeah, and I suppose starting, your education with having like, some sort of issues, right, with your being dyslexic and struggling to read and having hyperactivity problems, that must have been hard to endure for yourself and your family. So it's already an early stage challenge that you had to face. That must have played some role.
Well, for sure, a lot of credit to both of my parents, which just endure all of that. I know for a fact that it wasn't easy. They put a lot of work. Both they just, for example, they used to take me in an hour walk before going to school so that I could sort of stay put during school, and then another hour walk after school and half an hour walk before going to bed and things like that, which is of course a lot of work.
Yeah.
They also persevere. Like some teachers or some people suggested that I should go to some special school or maybe repeat a grade. And it's only due to them that they persevere. Say no, he's fine. He just needs to work a bit harder, and honestly, they put the work on it, and I indebted to them for that reason.
And I can see now from from how you describe yourself at the very beginning of our chat, how these things are linked, right? So the roles your family played in your development is being so key that you are particularly attached, maybe more than the average people, and the love you were speaking about, and how you put yourself as being a father first. I think that's an interesting story. Have you ever thought about that?
Absolutely. No, I'm well aware that I'm here because of my circumstances and that I've been incredibly lucky in so many different ways, and I'm in debt to so many people. Of course, my parents, my family, my institution. Like for example, here at UNAM, it's a completely free education, and that's an education that probably I wouldn't had otherwise, because most countries is not free to study, and so just having that opportunity, it allowed me to be where I am today. So for sure, I think a lot about that, how lucky I have been, and how many people have helped me to be here.
And alongside all the things that you mentioned, I know that sport played an important role for yourself in your life, and it probably still does. And can you speak about that as well?
Yeah, for sure. I guess from very early on, like my parents, as a way to deal with my hyperactivity, led me to all sorts of sports, just trying me to waste some energy. And I really love it. My father was an avid swimmer. She was about to go to the Olympics by swimming when he was young. And that culture of sports really stuck to me. And I try a lot of sports, and by the time I enter high school, I start to get a lot into triathlon. And I started training very heavily, sometimes 3 times a day, and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to go to the Olympics. In the end, of course, I couldn't do it. I wasn't talented enough. But I spent the best part of, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of my life just training really hard for that, and that has helped me a lot, because I've learned so much about within sports, and just trying to be yourself, to beat yourself, to improve yourself, and to keep persevering. And that's there's a lot of lessons that I've learned from sports. Also, team playing, how to deal with teams, competition, and all that. I think those are lessons that you can translate to pretty much everything in your life, whether it being relationships, work, and whether that being your work being science or economics or whatever you want to do. That's for sure. There's a lot of things that I can translate, and that I definitely use almost on a daily basis.
So your attachment to your family, your capacity to endure, efforts and persevere, and your love for challenge, how much have they played a role in you deciding to go back to Mexico after your experience in the US and decide that was the place to develop your scientific career?
It definitely played a role. First, it made me not be scared to a challenge or to start something new. Secondly, it kind of motivated me to do it even better, and to try to sort of prove myself. And also because I also felt that I owe something to the university, to my country, that had given me all those opportunities. So all those played a role, and having that background in sports definitely helped me to not be afraid, and to just go with it.
It is interesting because I guess you knew what you were going towards, right? So obviously you could have had potentially an easier development as a scientist in a country with a stronger scientific tradition, with more funding available. It could have been easier. Maybe you could have got where you are today faster, or with less effort, or your group could be 3 times the size, or whatever. Obviously no one knows. This is just an hypotheticals. And I was reading with interest your editorial on chemistry of materials, where you were speaking about the brain drain of Mexican scientists, right? And you were nearly there yourself somehow. So can you comment about that? Can you comment about the challenges of doing science in Mexico, and the motivation to actually do it?
Yeah, for sure. As you said, Mexico is not a country with a big tradition in science, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But of course, one of those is the funding is definitely not as high as in many other countries, especially not like first world countries. So we're not there yet. And that makes it harder. As you probably know, we need a lot of resources to do science, both and in all terms, instruments, people, network, and of course just monetary resources. And just for that reason, it can be really challenging to do that because we're not there yet. We don't have that culture to support that much. The industry, like high tech industry, is it's very scarce here, which also makes it hard to go out and make partnership with just startups or new industries or things like that. So there's a lot of challenges there, and finally there's also the cultural challenges that because we're not a country that has done so much, at least recently, we're not used to that, and therefore like students or even some professors around do not believe that you can do science here at a high level, and that's definitely a challenge that we have to address and that we're trying to improve upon.
And in your paper, you mentioned, new programs and a sort of cultural evolution that is actually making it possible. And you're probably at the forefront, right? Do you want to demonstrate that this is possible?
Yeah. Well, luckily there have been some people that have looked at these issues. Some of the issues that have been making hard to progress in this front is that, as in many other countries, professors retain their position until they want or until they die. And because of the situation here with the retirement plans and the overall health system and all that, like almost no professor would want to voluntarily retire, which coupled with the low funding for universities and from projects makes that there were very, very little positions available in a common basis, which makes that anyone that was highly prepared had, even though they were highly and they were excellent in whatever disciplines they were, if there are no positions, there's not even the possibility to come back. And I know from many people close that are right now professors at the US or Europe or whatever, that they actually tried to come back, but there was not a possibility to even apply for something. So recently there have been this movement to incentivize retirement, and they have been some plans to aid and to make the retirement more appealing to some professors, and that has definitely helped to rejuvenate like the academic personnel in the, not only in UNAM but in the country as well, and I think that that is starting to show a little bit. There's a lot of more young people coming back and getting positions in different universities, which I think is great. Many of them have great education and of course great talent, and I think that that's going to help. Right now, perhaps a little bit of problem is that now the funding has been restricted even further, partly because of a government change and also partly because of the coronavirus pandemic. But there's been very little funding like this past 2 or 3 years, so that's been hard, and it might be challenging in the upcoming years.
And it's been really hard for you from the start. So I was attending your Talented 12 presentation, and you mentioned the fact that when you got back to UNAM and you started in your own position, they gave you $1,000 and that was it. So, and you kind of somehow, I can't imagine how you did it. You managed, now you actually have a sizable group, and you do research which is very sophisticated and requires access to certain type of technologies, right? And it's not really trivial. So I'm just curious, how did you spend your first dollar?
I can't even remember. I kind of laugh. I kind of laugh after I got $1,000, and I probably bought some chemicals, and I started to clean it. I got $1,000 and an old lab just full of trash, pretty much. And so I started cleaning, and then soon after a few students came along, and the first reactions were a challenge. We were just running all through the institute. Can I borrow a flask? Can I borrow salt? Can I borrow a stirrer? So we were just borrowing from everyone, and I have to say, like, most people were amazing, and they allowed us to borrow pretty much anything that we wanted, and all that. But so that's pretty much how we started, just borrowing from everyone that we could, and just asking everywhere that we could, how can we borrow this, can we borrow that, can we steal a little bit of this solvent, chemical, or whatever. And I gotta tell, like looking back, it was intense, just like making a silly reaction. It took us quite a while because we had to find every single thing, like from the hot plate to the flask to the stirrer to even the balance. We didn't even have a balance because the 1,000 buck doesn't even get you a balance. So
it must be nice to stop and look back though, right? So now you're in a much better shape, and if you look back at these early beginnings, that must feel like something.
For sure. Whenever you build something, that feels good, and for sure now that I walk to my lab and I see all what we have built, the people working there and doing nice stuff, it's really gratifying to see that, for sure.
You mentioned at the beginning about the importance of the network, right, among the various things in doing science. Obviously, you had an experience abroad in the US with in a number of prestigious groups, and I'm sure that has played a role. So, do you still rely for your nectar or on a strongly international community, or are you building up something within, Mexico and your sort of region?
I try to do a little bit of everything. I for sure still stay in contact with some of colleagues and friends that are abroad. I mean, whether I met them while I was there or now, and for sure we do something with them. But we also try to do something like just in-house and to have some projects that are not, I don't want to say just UNA, but more like with Mexican collaborators here in Mexico, because we also think that it is important.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is correct, but sometimes I feel like whenever you publish something and then you have a bunch of no-name universities, and then you have one big one, like most people tend to associate that publication just with the big name, fairly or unfairly. So at some point, I also feel like it's important for us to have those kind of publications that are mostly from our end. So we try to balance that.
And all things considered, how do you see the future for science in Mexico? Are you positive about it?
From the talent and the human side, I think there's a great potential, and I've seen it over and over again. We're hoping that the funding and the politicians makes better decision in the near future, and if they do, I think there's a great future. At the moment, that is uncertain, and so it's hard to comment on that. But we'll try to make as much pressure as we can.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you can play a role, being, of course, becoming a big name in the field, and I'm sure you will play this role. So the future looks a bit uncertain, but there are promises. But your present is certainly already pretty good, right? And so there's a lot to be proud of, and I think it's time to jump into your work a little bit and start discussing about your science, what you do, and there's a lot of exciting things there. So your team focused on material sciences, right? With the particular focus and interest on the perovskites as types of materials. I guess a great way to start this would be for you to explain what perovskites are for people, let's say like myself, not particularly familiar with them.
Yeah, for sure. So perovskites, it's a family of materials that has been known for a long time, and it's a really big family of materials that can be made of many different elements and many different combination of elements. And with this diversity of composition, perovskites have been known for a long time, and they have been used for several different things, like, for example, as magnets, as piezoelectrics, as ferroelectrics, and as thermoelectrics, many others and kind of applications. But most recently, around 2009, there were a couple of reports that showed that a particular set of materials within this perovskite family, known as halide perovskites, were pretty good at working as the main material for solar cells, as the absorbing materials in solar cells. And not only they can work as materials in solar cells, but they can work very, very well. And they have shown, like after that, there's been a plethora of research around it and a lot of excitement in the community, because they have shown that they can be really good. They can be competitive with the established technologies such as silicon, but they could potentially be much cheaper than silicon, and that's of course really exciting because, as many of you might know, solar cell is a really important topic, especially going into this energy and climate crisis that we're facing up right now.
So you mentioned that it's a very diverse family of compounds, right? There's a big number of elements in the periodic table that can be part of perovskites. But what are their common characteristics? How do you define a perovskite?
Yeah, I guess their definition of perovskite is kind of a bit ambiguous, and there's some discussion around it. I guess the more traditional definition of perovskite is a material which has an ABX3 minimal formula, and that makes octahedra around the B atom, and those octahedra are connected in the corners, making this cubical or pseudo-cubical lattice that grows in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, going back to the field, they show particular promises in solar applications, but they actually have a lot of different properties depending on how you vary their composition and their structure. And it's really complex, right? Because it's not just the elemental composition of the perovskite, it's also its 3-dimensional or bidimensional structures, the way the crystals are assembled and oriented in the material. So can you speak about that? How is the research in the field usually organized? So what do you focus on primarily? Is it more on the chemical composition of the material? Is it more in its fine 3-dimensional structure at the microscopic, or even nano level?
Yeah, for sure. There's all those avenues and more to explore in the perovskite field. We consider ourselves a materials chemistry group, so we try to develop new materials, new compositions, and new structures. And we try to do it in a way that we sort of either address some need of the current materials, for example, to decrease toxicity of the current materials or increase stability of the current materials, whether that being by small tuning of the current materials or just completely changing the formula and sometimes even the structure of the materials. And we also try to use some of the knowledge that we have gathered in the photovoltaic community and all the properties of these materials and try to use it for other things that might not be as traditional as solar cells. For example, we also try to look into LEDs, right? Or maybe we try to look into car materials, just looking into nonlinear optics phenomena, and couple that with our expertise in material synthesis, try to create new materials that could be apt for a different kind of application.
So would you say that your research is driven mostly by potential applications rather than the fundamental science of the chemical composition?
I guess it's a combination. We don't want to just go and try to show that a new composition is possible and without caring about why would that composition be interesting or be useful at some point. But we also don't want to just go full, just try to make the best device or the best efficiency and just try to fine tune a known material, for example. So we don't want to go in either extreme. We want to find that middle ground where we're developing new materials that we can show that are good for something and perhaps we're at this point not able to show that they are the best of doing something or that they would be top notch. But if we can at this point just show that we can get this new material and show that it can do something new that hasn't been shown in another material or having it been shown in this class of materials, I think that's a great start, and that's where we are right now.
Are you focusing on the halide perovskite mostly, or are you exploring a broader set of materials?
Yeah, I would say that most of our focus is on halide perovskites for sure. We've had a few other tries here and there, but it's for sure mostly driven by halide perovskites.
So you said that the perovskites, the halide perovskite, particularly in the solar applications, are currently matching silicon materials in terms of efficiency, and they got there pretty quickly, right? So I think the silicon solar cells have been out for 20 years or even more, isn't it?
Well, the first silicon solar cells was reported around 1950.
Okay.
At a lab scale for sure, and so silicon solar cells have been developing for over 60 years for sure. Perovskites have gotten there in 12, 13 years maybe. And that's part of the excitement, that this has been a development that we haven't seen ever for a photovoltaic material. And right now we're not really sure what's the true potential or what are the limits for perovskites, and that's of course very exciting.
So what are the current limitations? Why aren't all solar panels made of perovskite at the moment?
Well, of course, it's a development technology. I guess the main concern right now is the stability. Mm-hmm. Being such a young technology, it's hard to predict how they will be stable in 10, 15, 20 years right now. So there's still a lot of work being done on studying how long will they last and what is the exact composition and solar cell architecture to make them last enough for a solar panel that you probably want it to last at least 10, 15 years, right? So I guess that's the main limitation. However, there's a lot of optimism in the field that this year is going to be the first year that we have perovskite solar cells in the market. There's quite a few companies already that are pushing really hard towards that end. I've seen some prototypes, and there's at least 2 or 3 companies that have promised the first perovskite product this year.
I'd like to go a little bit in the chemistry. So this is a non-straightforward, to my perspective, inorganic synthesis, right? These materials tend to be fairly complicated, and I'm sure you need to get some control over the way they crystallize, right? How you assemble them, and you also need to control their three-dimensional structure. So what are the main challenges? How does the chemistry work from the synthetic perspective?
Well, in fact, it's quite a simple reaction. It's quite simple chemistry, and that's part of the beauty and part of the success of perovskites. It's just in the most traditional way, you get cesium iodide, lead iodide, mix them together and precipitate them, crystallize them over a substrate, and then you make a solar cell from that. So it's actually it's fairly basic chemistry in most cases. Of course, that's only the start, and then you start optimizing and improving your materials, your conditions, and optimizing for the particular architecture or ultimate application. But I wouldn't say it's particularly complicated chemistry.
Is it scalable enough? So can it be industrialized in a relatively straightforward way?
I think so. We're not there yet for sure. There's a lot of challenges. For instance, we can compete with solar cells in a very small scale in making cells that are maybe a square centimeter or so. But then going to a panel or something that is bigger is still challenging. But I'm confident that we can get there in the next few years. It's a matter of time and just developing.
I was particularly curious about your work on the your review on the two-dimensional perovskites and their characteristics versus the three-dimensional ones. So I confess I was struggling to visualize a bidimensional structure. Is it like a sort of graphite layers, or how does it look like, and why are they better?
Yeah, that's actually a great definition, or a great analog. A graphite, it's a great example of a 2D material, and many of these perovskites are quite similar to graphite on that end, in the sense that the main frame is only connected in two directions, in let's say X and Y, but in the C direction there's no chemical bond that make them stay together, and two-dimensional perovskites is just that, the dimensional reduction of a three-dimensional one. And there's some good things that you can get when you do this, when you go from 3D to 2D. In particular, we usually get a much better stability, and that's of course really good for long-term applications. There's also a lot of excitement, because then now you can do a lot of things between the layers. The way that we laminate this is we usually put some organic cation in there, such as ammonium salt, and that is, and you can put all sort of ammonium salts in there. And now you can play with organic chemistry and then change the ammonium salt for something that do something. For example, that upconvert light, or that polymerize, so that you can get better stability and things like that. You can couple really good properties in light absorption and I guess exit and separation in the inorganic layers, and couple that with some additional functionality that you may be able to introduce using the organic part and all the knowledge that we have in organic chemistry.
That's really interesting. And so I guess this can open the door to have some sort of solar energy generation from a broader variety of macroscopic materials. I don't know, you can coat glass, or you can use it as a sort of potential building material. And there's, I guess creativity is the limit here.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much to unpack here, and that's why there's so much excitement in the field and so much research. Because really there's a lot to create, a lot of new things to try. Because if you couple the diverse chemistry of perovskites and even organic chemistry in general, and you couple it with organic chemistry, which might be even more broad than that, because we have so many chemical reactions, and we can control so well the chemical structure of organic materials. Yeah. Then you literally get unlimited possibilities of combination. And now the trick is, how do you select both parts, and how do you choose wisely so that you can get something that is useful, exciting, or somewhat new.
Of the various projects you're running in your group, what is the most exciting? Maybe you have more than one, but what really takes you out of bed and in the morning at the moment? What is the most promising thing you're seeing in your lab at the minute?
Yeah. So just recently, I would have to say this one where we're coupling conducting polymers with two-dimensional perovskites, and it's a really fun one, because so we get these materials, and then that don't absorb very good light, or that are not as stable, and then when we couple them together, we can get materials that can absorb very well and that are very stable. And I think that combination, that synergistic approach of two materials just showing properties that are just better than the sum of its parts is just really, really exciting.
What are these conductive polymers chemically?
So we're trying different things. That there's not just one composition. Perhaps the most successful ones have been dienes, which are just polymers that have two triple bonds next to each other, or actually multiple double and triple bonds conjugated among themselves. So that those are probably the most successful ones right now.
Okay, that's interesting. So the synergy between two materials that becomes bigger than the sum of their parts. That's what you're speaking about.
Yeah, I guess that's the definition of synergy, right?
Yeah.
Something that that is greater than the sum of its parts.
It's good. It's interesting. How much involvement of industrial partners there are in the field? Maybe not directly with yourself, or maybe yes, but because I guess you're so close to the applications, right? And you're mentioning that there are actually some commercial applications, the technology coming up. So how much of the field is funded by private money at the moment?
I wouldn't have a number, but there's a lot of private money coming in, and of course government money. There's I can't even count it right now. Last time I checked, or at least the ones that I know, there were about 12 to 13 new companies that were funding in the past 7 or 8 years around perovskite for different applications, whether that being just solar cells, displays. There's some like chargers for cars, or even like smart tags and smart labels. So there's quite a bit of interest, I would say. I don't have a number, unfortunately, and most of that it's not that easily available. But I can tell that there's quite a bit.
What does the future of solar look like then, in your view? If you have to, I know it's difficult, right? But if you had a crystal ball and you could foresee the future, among the various technologies that are out there, the established silicon-based ones, there are organic photovoltaics, there are the perovskites. How are we going to generate energy 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that definitely 10 years from now, we will be using a combination of perovskite and silicon, what we call tandem solar cells, in which we have two layers, one of silicon and one of perovskite, to generate electricity, particularly in the settings where area is somewhat restricted, such as cities. If you wanna generate electricity, solar electricity in the city, you definitely want the higher energy density possible per area, right? So for sure that's gonna be for cities, and maybe even for solar parks or just like big scale energy. We'll have to see about that. And in the longer term, I do believe that, especially for solar farms and applications where area is not key, I do see perovskites starting to take over some silicon markets for sure.
Is it because of the cost mostly?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And among the, let's say, more niche properties of perovskite, you mentioned light emission, you mentioned magnetic properties. There's a number of things that these materials can do. Do you foresee any of these being more promising than others?
Well, there's a lot of promise right now, and I think it's maybe not a reality, but it should be really close to that. In LEDs and just displays, just use as phosphors in displays such as quantum dots or things like that. So I think that for sure is the next step after solar cells, and after that there's going to be a plethora of applications that is going to be competing. Maybe one is going to be detectors, whether that being for X-rays, gamma rays, or some sort of radiation. There's interest in, I would say, detectors were more like chemical detectors, not so much as physical detectors. And there are plenty of other technologies that might be coming along their way. But those would be just in a tight race, I would say.
What about photocatalysis? Are they used as a photocatalyst at all? Because a lot of these sort of photoelectric materials can have this kind of application, can they?
For sure, yeah. They have been shown to be able to do photocatalysis, and that's something exciting. But there's still some challenges there, mostly because most of these materials are not stable in water, and usually you want to do this sort of catalysis in water. Yeah. And right now it's a challenge to do that. So maybe you can think of some specialty kind of reaction where you don't need to be in aqueous media, but but that's maybe a more reduced applied field. So we'll have to see about that. But there's definitely potential in there.
And how does the future look like for Diego? So what kind of role do you want to play in all this? Or do you have anything in your back pocket?
In my back pocket, right now I have nothing, literally, and figuratively. Yeah, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of projects that we're excited about and that we're trying to push hard.
Yeah.
We have been, I would say, hampered by the pandemic for sure. We had a lot of difficulty just moving forward. So like this past year was maybe just trying to catch up with all that we did not do in 2020, and hopefully this year we can start just doing new and exciting stuff again. Like. So we're just trying to catch up right now and try to get back to the rhythm that we had before the pandemic.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I think we have all had enough of the situation, right? And we're all looking forward to, going back to whatever life we had before the pandemics. I mean, it's been 2 years. Long enough for all of us. But I can only say good luck, right? I am positive, but no one really quite know for sure.
I know. No, we're just trying to stay positive and find a way to try to adapt, because it seems like it's still gonna be there for a while. So we'll try to adapt and make the best that we can.
Anyway, I mean, there's a lot to be impressed already, Diego, for what you have achieved so far, and the pandemic obviously is not helping anyone. I'm sure you've had lots of challenges over your development, and you're gonna overcome this as well, and come back even stronger than before. And there's the only thing I feel like doing is congratulating you for what you have achieved so far. It's really impressive. And that's the best way I can think of to get to my typical final questions of my interviews, right? Which is a good one to ask to someone who is still very young but already very established and successful like yourself. So if you had to stop and look back, and if you had to speak to someone who is just starting in your career based on your experience so far, what would be a piece of recommendation that you would give?
Yeah, there's so much to say, but if I had to say one, I had to say that you gotta learn how to say no and choose your opportunities and your avenues wisely. Sometimes as a young scientist or whatever, you're eager to do a lot of stuff, and you're often invited to do a lot of things, whether that being just like committees or reviewers or editors and conference and all things like that. And it's sometimes hard to, it can be overwhelming, especially if you just start saying yes to a lot of stuff. So I would say just pick wisely, be picky, not in a bad way, and of course not being rude or anything. Just I guess you can always decline politely, and that's fine. So just keep the main thing, and don't be afraid to say no. I think that's something that I wish I would have learned earlier.
This is a great one, Diego, and it's very unique and very wise as well. So, well, thank you. I mean, I really enjoyed this. It's been
me too.
It's been fantastic. Thank you again for being with us. Best of luck for your future endeavors. I know you'll do great things, and I'll keep an eye on you, and maybe we can have another chat some point in the future and see where you got to.
For sure. Thank you, Paul. It was great.